Hey there, NASCAR fans. Have you got your copy of the latest edition of NASCAR Pole Position Print Magazine? If not, there's no better time than now to subscribe at polepositionmag.com. NASCAR Pole Position is the only print magazine covering NASCAR. Officially licensed by NASCAR, NASCAR Pole Position Magazine is published throughout the NASCAR season, and each edition is an instant collector's item, packed with great feature stories and photography. The magazine is even mailed to you in a poly bag for those who love to collect NASCAR memorabilia. At polepositionmag.com, you can even find past issues available to purchase. Get your subscription to NASCAR Pole Position and get great NASCAR content delivered straight to your mailbox throughout the season. Learn more at polepositionmag.com. That's polepositionmag.com.
Hey y'all, Rick Houston here, and I want to tell you about my new show, the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast. I've partnered up with the state of North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to help uncover the history behind moonshining mountain boys, professional wheelmen, and the backwoods and city lights of the Tar Heel State. In the first episode, I sat down with Winston Kelly at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for a little behind-the-scenes gossip about Junior Johnson's engineering skills.
He's got two things in his hand, pipe wrench and channel lock pliers, and they weren't new. They had been around the block a time or two.
Wasn't the first steel they built, I bet.
No. I think the pliers had been red before, but paint had worn off.
And in the second episode, I talked to a professional hillbilly, a.k.a. Dr. Daniel Pierce of UNC Asheville, to find out the real history of moonshiners and their battles with the revenuers.
He wrote about one of his experience of trying to chase down this bootlegger in this souped up car, and he complained that the government gave him these piece of crap, cheapo cars, and that were really no match, but he thought he was doing pretty good, and then the guy just hits it and just takes off and practically disappear. But then the guy makes a bootleg turn and comes back towards him. And as he said, it was a game of chicken, and I was the chicken. And so he ran off the road. And actually, he was the guy who caught Junior Johnson at his daddy's steel when Junior got tangled up in a barbed wire fence.
So check out the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast, available on YouTube, dailydownforce.com, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out my regular show on NASCAR history, the Scene Vault Podcast.
Welcome to the Pickup Throwdown Truck Series podcast, the only NASCAR podcast that's always down to truck. And now, your host, Dale Tanhardt.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the newest edition of the Pickup Throwdown podcast covering the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. We've had an eternal long break, it seems. We've seen some good NASCAR action at Talladega and at Dover. But now the wait is over, depending on when you listen to this podcast. And technically it's not over. We still have a few days until the Heart of America 200 at Kansas Speedway, which debatably is the best track on the schedule with how it races in all three NASCAR National Series. We've come to love Kansas, and it's one of the few tracks that the Craftsman Truck Series will visit twice in 2024. As I said, it's been a hiatus. We took last weekend off from recording a Pickup Throwdown episode. Just be sure to check out everything we got going on at the Daily Downforce. Be sure to bookmark it. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at the Daily Downforce. I'm Dale Tanhardt. Follow me everywhere. Joined by Joshua Lipowski. Follow him at jlipowski18 over on Twitter and check out everything he's got going on the dailydownforce.com website. Josh, quick trivia. Who was the last driver to win at Dover in the Truck Series?
Ooh, last driver to win at Dover in the Truck Series. I have to go. When was the last time they raced there? What was it, like late 2010?
2020.
Something like that?
2020.
Oh, 2020. Okay. Ooh, I got a couple ideas. I'm tossing between two in my head. I'm going to guess Sheldon Creed. That's my guess.
Good answer. That was a good year for him, but incorrect. Answer is Zane Smith. Ford GMS. Yeah, Ford GMS. So there you go. That's pretty close.
I think I think the Cup Series race proved that those days are long behind him.
Yeah, no kidding. I feel for him. It has been a tough start to the rookie campaign for Zane Smith in 2024, even though we're expecting to see him more in the Truck Series. I don't know how many more starts he's got, but we'll get into that later. Zane Smith's been kind of off and on in trucks and on a part-time basis with McAnally, and those really, really good trucks. But yes, trucks off for Dega, off for Dover, and we return to Kansas for the Heart of America 200 this Friday night. Can't wait to see the entry list come out. Can't wait to see the trucks under the lights at a track that has become so beloved by the NASCAR fan base. But before we get into our Kansas preview, last thing we teased before we took our off weekend was to do a full playoff prediction preview, kind of like a March Madness, which that's kind of what makes an aspect of the playoffs that is fun, right? You can kind of make a bracket, if you will. And with the Truck Series, just a reminder, we've got 9 races until the beginning of the playoffs. Doesn't seem like a lot, and it really isn't, but with how it's spread out the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series schedule is, we are winding down and are on the stretch to the beginning of the playoffs that begin on August 25th with the Milwaukee Mile Sunday race, by the way. Always love that. Craftsman Truck Series on Sunday. Kind of sick. Give us a couple standalone Sunday races a year. I think that's a great idea. Milwaukee Mile, good to see them back on the schedule. But before we get there, we've got a long path of a lot of different racetracks. And we've got our current playoff grid right now. As it stands, we know Christian Eckes, Corey Heim, Nick Sanchez, and Raja Carruth, 4 of the 5 winners in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2024, are locked in. 5th winner, Kyle Busch, obviously not campaigning for points in this series. And then you got Ty Majeski, Taylor Gray, Tyler Ankrum, Matt Crafton, Tanner Gray, and Grant Enfinger. That is the current playoff grid at this point. Just a reminder, only 10 trucks make the playoffs. After 3 races, we eliminate 2. After 3 races, we eliminate 4, and then you have your final 4 at Phoenix. So structured a little bit differently, but the same concept when it comes to how the playoffs are delivered and how they're executed when we get into the final 7-8 races of the season. So we're going to go over our playoff predictions. We're going to go over our little brackets, if you will. I know we're a couple months off of March Madness, we're in April. Yeah, we're like a month off. We're not too far off. We're not too late to the party. By the way, Josh, I did win my Dale Tanhardt pool, by the way. It's pretty nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a big win. Nice.
It came down to, which my first round was terrible, but I had Connecticut go all the way. And then it came down to me and someone else. I had Connecticut. They had Purdue. Whoever won was going to win the pool. So that's how it turned out. Hopefully.
A big win for you.
Yes, absolutely. Because, look, I'm a big sports guy, but I suck at predicting anything in anything outside of NASCAR. So that was a big win for the confidence. But now we're on to the grid, to the bracket, if you will, that actually matters. That is our NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series playoff brackets. Josh, I want to start with you, see where you're kind of leaning on the current grid that we have versus the grid that you'll have, or the grid that you're going to have once we hit playoffs after IRP.
So the way I look at it right now, Dale, is I view that there are 7 guys that are currently locks for the playoffs at this point. And those guys are obviously our 4 winners: Christian Eckes, Corey Heim, Nick Sanchez, Raja Carruth. Each have a win. Each of them are well inside the top 10 in points. The only way they miss the playoffs is if there are more than 10 winners and they drop out of the top 10 in points. The only way that's going to happen, I don't see that happening unless there's some sort of a catastrophic event, be that a driver injury or something like that. We obviously don't want that to happen, but that's what it would take for these drivers to miss. So those 4 guys are good. The 3 guys currently in on points I feel good about: Ty Majeski, Taylor Gray, Tyler Ankrum. All are 82 points or more above the cut line. Ty Majeski's 113 above the cut line. On top of that, all these drivers are drivers that I think can win at some point. So I feel really good. These guys are in. Lock these 7. These 7 are in. Where it gets really interesting is the bubble. The bubble right now, as I stand here, there are currently 8 drivers that are within 33 points above or below the cut line. And those guys are Matt Crafton, Tanner Gray, and Grant Enfinger, all in. Crafton plus 33, Gray plus 9, Enfinger plus 5. The guys just out, Daniel Dye minus 5, Ben Rhodes, defending champion, out by 6 points, Stuart Friesen minus 17, Bailey Curry minus 24, and Jake Garcia minus 24. Each of these guys, all drivers that are in race-winning equipment. And then everybody else from here on out, I view these guys as probably in must-win territory. Brett Holmes, Chase Purdy, Dean Thompson, Timmy Hill, Ty Dillon, and then Lane Riggs, Mason Massey, Spencer Boyd, Lawless Allen, Matt Mills, and Thad Moffitt. So a couple guys in there that you feel like could win a race. It's kind of in that must-win territory. I think I look at guys like Chase Purdy and Lane Riggs in particular as guys that could potentially win a race. Maybe even Ty Dillon, too. I think Ty Dillon could sneak one in there. But realistically, the way that all these drivers have been doing right now, I view that there are 3 spots currently up for grabs. And right now, I view those 3 spots as going to these 3 drivers. And I'm basing this, Dale, solely on equipment. So, and the reason being is because we all know driver talent matters, but we also know how much that equipment matters in the Craftsman Truck Series and in NASCAR in general. The drivers with the best equipment end up winning races most of the time. We talked about it, Dale. I mean, each of the Truck Series race winners this year have come from the same stable. Either from Spire Motorsports, either from Bill McAnally, or from Tricon. Those are your 3 teams.
Or their satellites.
Yeah,
which have the same equipment. Yeah.
Yes, or that. You also have teams like ThorSport, like Ty Majeski, well within the cut line, all kind of in there. All these teams are kind of the ones that are in there, so those are the ones that I'm watching. So as of right now, Dale, I'm going to tell you there are 3 drivers on the bubble right now that I feel like are going to get into the playoffs. I think Matt Crafton gets in. 33-point cushion is not as much as you think it is, especially with 9 races left. But I still think, given his equipment, I think I'm going to give Matt Crafton the benefit of the doubt there, and Matt Crafton's going to get in. I think Tanner Gray does as well. I like the Tricon Garage equipment. Again, that's really what puts him over the top for me. And then I'm going to go with Ben Rhodes. I think Ben Rhodes is going to find himself in there as well. I think he jumps Daniel Dye and Grant Enfinger. Grant Enfinger, I think Grant Enfinger has done an admirable job in that CR7 equipment, but I just don't know if it's enough to carry him into the playoffs. He hasn't finished better than 9th all season long, and I'm just not sure if having only 2 top 10s in the first 7 races, I just don't know if that's going to ultimately be enough, especially if some of these guys like Ben Rhodes start to catch fire. I think that'll be interesting. Now, with that being said, Dale, I have one guy that I'm watching for that could be a spoiler in all of this. There's one guy that I'm really watching for, and that guy is Lane Riggs. I know that may sound weird because Lane Riggs is a guy that I kind of ragged on him a little bit on the show, and understandably so. He has definitely, without a doubt, disappointed this year. There's no way around it. But I look at these final 9 races, and there are 3 true short tracks in these final 9 races. You have North Wilkesboro, you have Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park, IRP. I don't know why I didn't just say IRP, and Richmond. All those tracks are tracks that Lane Riggs, remember how good he was at Martinsville before Martinsville went to hell in a handbasket for him? Okay, thanks to everybody treating him like a pinball. I think those are races. I wouldn't be shocked to see Lane Riggs win one of those 3. I'm not going to predict it necessarily. I'm not quite there yet on him, but I think he's a guy to watch for in those 3 races, I think.
Yep. I had a feeling that's what you would say. And, you know, not just the short tracks with Lane Riggs, but you got to consider the strong point of that equipment over the past few years with Zane Smith has been on some of the intermediates, right? Like you get a Nashville Super Speedway in there, you have a Pocono. That truck has speed at big racetracks. And then you have Lane Riggs, who's got the skill set that we believe could bring him to victory lane on a short track, like you just mentioned. So, yeah, I think Lane Riggs is absolutely the biggest spoiler because it's an uphill climb for him to make it on points, which can still happen. But with his youth, go ahead.
I don't know if I said this, but he is 61 points below the cut line at this point. So just for some context, 60 points is the maximum you can earn in a race, and no driver's ever made this big of a comeback to make it into the playoffs with this late in the season.
There you go. And with his youth, the teams had gremlins. They had a DQ it's going to be tough to make up those points. So I think Lane's in a spot where they're already telling him, we need to win. We got to win a race. So watch out for that number 38 team with Lane Riggs. And yeah, like you said, my 10 are pretty close. I've got a couple differences though. Maybe I think we're only off by one actually, but I'll get into it. So yeah, Eckes, Heim, Sanchez, and Carruth are in. There's no doubt about it. It's extreme low probability that we have, like you said, 6 or 7 different winners in the last 9 races. Not going to happen. There's not enough winning competitive teams that can make that happen, that are going to be playoff eligible. So those 4 are in. Ty Majeski, incredibly in on points. Taylor Gray, I think, is going to be in, like you said. He's had a great year and has been very competitive. I think he's going to win this week at Kansas. We'll dive more into that here shortly. But he's got a good cushion, very good race trucks. He's in. Matt Crafton, I think, is in. This seems like a different Matt Crafton compared to years past. So I think he will make it as well. And then I'm going to have Ben Rhodes. I think you had Rhodes. I think just the championship experience with him and Rich Lucius means enough that he can make up this very small deficit that he has. He's 5 points out. So, I mean, Ben Rhodes with the championship experience, several good racetracks ahead for them. I think they'll figure it out and they will get in. And then I got Stuart Friesen. I think Stuart Friesen is going to get in. I think that's our one difference. I think Stuart Friesen is a guy that's got really good equipment and has had a lot of bad finishes this year when they've run well, run inside the top 10, at least run in positions. Even if it wasn't a top 10, they've run around the top 15 where they could have a decent points day, and they've been jumped multiple times. So I think if that gets cleaned up, Stuart Friesen will be a top 10 guy down the stretch, and that will put him in the top 10 in points, and he will get in. So that's my 10. And as I said earlier, the way this goes, and I actually misspoke. I said the cutoff is IRP. It's actually Richmond. Cutoff is Richmond. It goes IRP and then Richmond to close out the regular season, open up the playoffs at Milwaukee. The way this works, as I said earlier, instead of like the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series, where they eliminate 4 drivers in every single round, trucks only eliminate 2 in the first round because it's 10 drivers. So they kind of have to do it a little bit differently in how they cut, how they eliminate. So first 2 out, Josh, what do you got there? This is where it gets interesting on how we build these.
Yeah, this is really tough because I think, the Truck Series, I really think that between these 10 drivers, I actually think it's quite competitive. Like, I think all 10 of these drivers, I think, could catch fire at some point this season and could make a run in the playoffs, I believe. I think that this is, I really believe the championship's wide open. I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite. I think we talked about that last week. You look at that last race at Phoenix in particular, it's such a crapshoot. But as you take a look at how the first round goes, we have 3 tracks in there, all very different. You have the Milwaukee Mile, which is a 1-mile track. I'd probably classify it more as an intermediate, I would say. It's a little bit too big to race like a short track, so I'd probably put that in the intermediate. Then you got Bristol, which is a high bank half mile. Then you got Kansas, which is where we're racing this weekend, ironically enough. So you have those 3 tracks in the first round. So all 3 very different types of racetracks. And I think as I look at the guys that are going to be out, I have to look at Matt Crafton and Tanner Gray, I think, is the ones I have to look at. I think primarily just due to a performance standpoint. Again, Ben Rhodes, with that championship experience, I think that carries him somewhat a little bit. Plus, I think the fact that you saw how Ty Majeski was at Martinsville. I think that Thor Sport's really good on short tracks. I think Ben Rhodes will thrive there. I do think Matt Crafton finds a way to have a really good race at Bristol. I think if Matt Crafton can find a way to win Bristol, I think that's his ticket out of the round of 10. But I don't know if he'll get there if he doesn't win that race. So I'm going to go with Matt Crafton and Tanner Gray is out in round 1 for me.
Interesting. Yeah, and in case you guys didn't realize, and maybe you didn't realize this, I have Tanner Gray actually missing the playoffs entirely, and that's because I think they just make too many mistakes. They make too many mistakes, and maybe they'll clean that up. They got good equipment. Tanner's got experience. He is experienced enough, I think, to take that next step, but I think he's going to be out because of just the mistakes that they continue to make. My first 2 out of my grid are going to be Stuart Friesen and Tyler Ankrum. I'm going to have that surprise right there. Tyler Ankrum has had quite the slide over the past few weeks. A lot of mistakes, crashes, bad performance. I think that Tyler Ankrum is just a guy that's just not going to step up in that round. And, when I look at these other guys around him, I think Taylor Gray is going to take that next step and be a huge contender this year. I think Matt Crafton, this is a really good round for him because Milwaukee Mile is an old school track. You say it's an intermediate, or that's where you categorize it, but it kind of races like a short track. The corners are very, very slow and sweeping. And
it's kind of in like that Phoenix, New Hampshire category.
It reminds me of like a unique gateway is what it reminds me of. Because, you have long straights and then you have high braking, low speed corners, and it's just shaped a little bit differently. And it's actually pretty cool. Like the way it turns 3 and 4 shaped, I love about the Milwaukee Mile. But regardless, it's an old school track, suits Matt Crafton. Bristol suits Matt Crafton. And Kansas is the site of Matt Crafton's last win. So I think that's actually a really good round for him if he gets in, and I think he'll be fine. Stuart Friesen, they just make too many mistakes. They've got speed, but they've had a black cloud. I think they get in, but when they do get in, they're not going to have playoff points. They're going to be right there on the edge, and I think they'll be eliminated along with Tyler Ankrum. You got to have something spicy in there, right? We know Ankrum is in great equipment. He's been top 5, especially in the first part of the year. Had a lot of top 5s, a lot of top 10s, kind of faltering a little bit, falling back a little bit. I think when we get there, Ankrum and Friesen will be my first 2 out. So once we move on from Milwaukee, Bristol, and Kansas, we will head into the next round, which is your round of 8. And this is the last round before you get to Phoenix, which is, it's over just like that, it seems like, in the Truck Series relative to the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series playoffs. And these are 3 great tracks. I love this round, whether it's Cup, Xfinity, or Trucks. If this were the combination, right, for Cup or Xfinity, it'd be sick. Talladega, Homestead, Martinsville. 3 very different styles of racing. And this is what will carve the path on the way to Phoenix. So, Joshua, what I'd like you to do is eliminate 4 more drivers to set your final 4 at Phoenix for the Craftsman Truck Series Championship.
I tell you what, Dale, this is an extremely tough round to predict, and the reason why is because Talladega is the first race of this round. I mean, Talladega is a race that the favorite could end up crashing out on the first lap and find themselves in a big hole heading into the final 2 races at Homestead and at Martinsville. So it's an extremely tough round to predict just because Talladega's in there. I actually will say this. I think that Talladega is going to give us a non-playoff winner. I'll make that prediction here in April. I mean, we've seen it before. We saw it last year with Brett Moffitt stealing that win for a front row at Talladega. This is a really tough round to predict, though, and I think if you, as you look through this, I think you have to look at Christian Eckes. I think has a lot of playoff points. I think you keep him in for that reason. I like that. I think Corey Heim is a guy that's just really good everywhere. I know that Martinsville wasn't his best race earlier this year, but still, he got a top 10. And I mean, Corey Heim's worst is a lot different than a lot of other drivers. So Christian Eckes and Corey Heim, I feel really, really good about making it into that Font Championship round. The next few is where it gets a little hairy because Nick Sanchez obviously won at Daytona, but I mean, that's really hard to replicate. It's hard to win on super speedways. So who are the guys that are knocked out? I think first of all, you got to go with Ben Rhodes. I don't love how the Fords have looked this year overall. I think some of that Ben Rhodes championship magic runs out. I think Ben Rhodes is knocked out, I think. I agree with you with Tyler Ankrum. Tyler Ankrum just seems like he doesn't quite have winning speed. I think he hasn't shown that this year. And I think when you get to this point in the playoffs, you need to find ways to win races. That's how you get into the championship race. You find ways to win races. So I think Tyler Ankrum's out. I think you knock Ben Rhodes out as well. So that leaves these other 4 drivers. I'm going to go with a bit of an upset pick. I know I just said I don't love the Fords, but I'm thinking Ty Majeski gets in because Ty Majeski looked really, really, really good at Martinsville earlier this year. He also has looked good on intermediates so far, and Homestead's in there. I like Homestead. I actually think that this race at Kansas is going to be very telling because Kansas and Homestead are very similar racetracks. So I'm going to give Ty Majeski that nod, so he's going to be the Ford representation. So that leaves 3 guys for 1 spot. We got Taylor Gray, Nick Sanchez, and Raja Carruth are all battling for that final spot. And for that final spot, it's really, really tough, but I got to give it to Nick Sanchez, because Nick Sanchez, I think, has put the best season to this point together. Out of the three, he got himself that win at Daytona. He's also really good on intermediate tracks. He has 5 top 10s. Roger Carruth has been good, been solid with 5 top 10s, but he's way further behind than Sanchez is in the points. It just doesn't seem like Carruth is quite on that same level. Carruth's kind of tapered off just a little bit. He's still very good. He's in that easily one of the top best drivers in the series right now. But I don't know if he's kind of in that A tier at this point. So I'm going to bump Roger Carruth out, and I'm going to bump Taylor Gray out as well. So I'm going to go with my eliminations are going to be Roger Carruth, Ben Rhodes, Tyler Ankrum, and Tanner Gray are my eliminations, which means my championship 4 is Christian Eckes, Corey Heim, Nick Sanchez, and Ty Majeski.
Okay. Well, I agree with you on a few of these. I think there's a couple obvious ones we're going to agree on. But when I look at this group of 8 that I have, yeah, it's a super, super strong group. You've got veterans mixed in with the hot shots. And I've got 3 Fords in my top 8 too, which kind of concerns me based upon what we've seen so far in 2024. But when I look at 4 guys to eliminate in this round, I think regardless if he's there or not, Ben Rhodes is going to win Talladega. That's just what I think is going to happen. He's knocked on the door in these super speedway style races for so long. He's going to pop. I think Ben Rhodes will win at Talladega. So he's in my final 4. Once again, I think him and Rich are going to find a way to get back to the championship once again with just their magic of just grinding it out in the end in these late season moments, regardless of how the regular season went. They're just so good at that. They've mastered it. So I think Ben Rhodes is going to be in. I'm going to eliminate Matt Crafton and Ty Majeski. I just think, Matt Crafton, I think, goes without saying just because of where he's at in the late stages of his career. Ty Majeski is a debatable one. He went out to Homestead and spanked the field last year. So Ty Majeski's kind of like we've got to have an upset somewhere, right? So I'm going to eliminate Ty Majeski. Feels like they just cannot close. They just can't close, and I think that's going to come back to bite them around this time of the playoffs. I'm going to eliminate Taylor Gray and Roger Carruth quite simply just because of the youth factor. Just because of this is going to be their first times in this moment. And I think there's 4 other guys that are just going to be more ready. And that's Ben Rhodes, Corey Heim, Christian Eckes. And one thing about Eckes, it's crazy that he actually missed the Final 4 last year. As hot as he was in the second half of the season, he actually missed. They just had too many mistakes, could not capitalize, could not close. Eckes, there's no way he misses this time around. Corey Heim back for more, back for vengeance after what happened to him at Phoenix. He's going to be in. And then I'm with you on Nick Sanchez. I talk about the youth are going to be the factor that keeps guys like Carruth and Taylor Gray out. But Nick Sanchez, man, he's just got that killer instinct. This is just a feel play. I just feel like Nick Sanchez has just got that instinct. It feels like not just with the competitiveness of his truck, but the competitiveness and the fire of the driver. I think that's going to separate him from his fellow graduates, if you will, from like ARCA. Seems like him, Raja, and Taylor Gray have kind of been in that same boat, same class, or similar class. So I think Nick Sanchez is the best out of those guys when it's all said and done in 2024. So my final 4 is Ben Rhodes, Nick Sanchez, Corey Heim, and Christian Eckes. So now your way too early prediction of who's going to win at Phoenix. Now it doesn't mean they're going to win the race. After what we saw last year, you don't have to win the race to win the championship. We've seen that 2 years in a row with this series. So not necessarily picking who wins Phoenix, but we are picking who wins the championship. Who is your pick to win the title at the end of 2024?
This is an interesting one to pick because Corey Heim was easily the best had the best car last year at Phoenix out of all the championship 4 contenders. That was obvious last year before everything happened at the end of that race. We all know what happened. Christian Eckes did take home the checkered flag in that race. I don't know if he had the best car necessarily, but he did survive. And he did end up taking home the checkered flag. But I think I'm going to look at this year for kind of my prediction at this point. Again, it's a small sample size, but the closest racetrack we've gotten to Phoenix this year is probably Martinsville, being that short oval, flat corners, a lot of finesse, more finesse in the corners than other tracks are. So I think Christian Eckes, he won that race. He looks really good. He also was able to get himself the win in the Bristol race earlier this March as well. So that's also worth looking at. So I think I look at that, and I think I have to go. And everything from last year is telling me to go Corey Heim. I think Corey Heim is probably going to be the favorite when we get to this point, because I think Corey Heim's the best driver in the series right now. But I think I look at the track, I look at what suits these drivers really well. I think Phoenix suits Christian Eckes and Bill McAnally really well, because it's a track, it's a short track that races kind of like an intermediate. And the thing with Corey Heim, and here's the thing, I think Corey Heim's a great driver, but Corey Heim is a guy, I mean, he's only won one race so far this year, only won 3 last year. For as good as he was, he only won 3 races last year. So he's always a guy that's remarkably consistent, but is he a guy that always gets wins? He doesn't win as much as I think some people would think that he does, whereas Christian Eckes has that flair for the dramatic. So again, way too early. I do think I'm curious to see how these guys race. I think North Wilkesboro is going to be a very telling race for that. I think Gateway as well. I think IRP, Richmond, Milwaukee Mile, I think will all be very telling. But I think based on the small sample size we have so far, I'm going to go with Christian Eckes, I think, to win this championship at Phoenix. Purely based off of the way that Phoenix suits him. Although I do think Corey Heim will probably be the popular pick heading into that weekend.
Yeah, for me, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You give Corey Heim 2 shots at this in this series, he's going to win one of them. Last year, he did not win. So I think Corey Heim, I'm going to keep it simple. Corey Heim's going to be the champ. Regardless of how many races he wins up to that point, you're not going to deny this guy twice in a row. I mean, I think, there's a consensus that this is a dude that will have a cup ride one day. And one day, potentially soon, with the level of talent he's displayed in a very short time between trucks and his limited Xfinity appearances as well. So I'm going to go with Corey Heim. And I guess between me and you, we picked the 2 best guys. Shocker. That makes it a little less fun. But look, you got to go with efficiency. I think the 2 most efficient, high level, high talent, great equipment teams/drivers in the series are Corey Heim and Christian Eckes. So we expect both of them to be there at Phoenix, and it will be fun to watch both those guys battle it out if they are there to determine the champion of the Craftsman Truck Series. So there you have it. There are your playoff grid predictions for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Way too early. It's a long way to go. I mean, we kind of talk about how, hey, only 9 races. But we've still got several months before we get to that point where we determine who's in the playoffs on the road to crowning a champion in 2024. And that road to the playoffs starts this Friday night with the Heart of America 200. Truck Night in America is back at Kansas Speedway. As we had mentioned, crazy how this place has become one of the most beloved tracks by the NASCAR fan base. The racing has just been phenomenal. It's suited every car well, and that includes the Truck Series. We saw some good racing here last year. Grant Enfinger actually won this race for GMS in the spring, and we came back here in the fall, and that race was won by Christian Eckes in a late race situation. He kind of stole that one win away. But regardless, it's a new year. We've got a new field, somewhat new field. We'll have some differences compared to last year. Obviously, the biggest one is Grant Enfinger not being, or GMS is who he drove for last year. Now he is with a satellite of McAnally, and, pretty evident to me that the equipment is not the same. So our defending winner essentially kind of has I think, an uphill battle to go back to back here when it comes to the spring race at Kansas. Getting right into it, Joshua, what sticks out to you? Do you have any notes? What do you expect on the entry list? What are we thinking about just from an early snapshot ahead of Kansas for the Truck Series?
I think the early snapshot, the first thing to look at, you talked about entry list. This is going to be a very unique entry list because we do have one Cup Series driver that's going to be in the field this week. That is going to be Zane Smith. Zane Smith will be driving for Bill McAnally Racing this weekend at Kansas, and he's been knocking on the door of some wins here in the Truck Series this year. He had top fives at Bristol and at Texas, so he's really doing a very good job there. But this entry list is going to be really interesting, too, because Cam Waters is also slated to make a Truck Series start this weekend at Kansas for Thor Sport. That's going to be really interesting. The supercar star making his second career start. I'm really curious to see, just because it's going to be his first time racing on like a traditional oval, which is a totally different beast than anything else on the schedule. I think that's going to be really fun to watch for him. But the one that I'm most excited for personally is Tricon Garage, bringing in 2018 NASCAR Truck Series champion Brett Moffitt. He's going to be driving the number 1 truck in select races this year. That schedule starts this weekend at Kansas Speedway. I'm really excited for that. Brett Moffitt, I think, is a really good driver. I definitely think he definitely has the talent to be full-time in NASCAR. I do think he's good enough for that. I do know, obviously, he's had some funding issues, and I know that he's kind of bounced from team to team, and I don't know if all those exits were necessarily, I don't know if those were necessarily chipper exits necessarily, but I still think he's good enough talent-wise to be in the NASCAR ranks somewhere. So I'm really excited for Brett Moffitt to be racing this weekend. I think this is a racetrack that I think he could win at, and I'm really excited for that. But that's the coolest thing. But it's an interesting entry list because we have a Cup guy, we have a past champion, and Brett Moffitt making his return. We also have a supercar star racing this weekend. That's all really cool.
Love that. And that's good news right there from our guy, Joshua Lipowski. On top of it, Zane Smith, this will be his 4th start. Remember, he's declared for points in the Cup Series. Therefore, he only gets 5 total starts. So he will only have 1 more start for the rest of 2024 after this race. Brett Moffitt, former champion, a guy that has a lot of wins on mile and a half. He actually won at Kansas in 2020. He's won at other intermediates like Chicago, Homestead, Michigan, Atlanta before the repave. No doubt that Brett Moffitt could be a factor this weekend. We've seen him hop in the Truck Series on some one-offs. You had mentioned it earlier when he won at Talladega last year, right? So Brett Moffitt is a guy to keep an eye on with Tricon equipment. You know, I expect his teammates, Taylor Gray, Corey Heim, to have really, really good speed based upon how they did in the Kansas races in 2023. A little bit of a snippet from what we saw at Las Vegas, which is our best comparison, and a pretty good comparison to Kansas on the track type as well. So watch out for Brett Moffitt, and it, as you said, going to be really fun to see what we get out of Cam Waters. Love the supercars guys coming over. Shout out Scott McLaughlin getting the IndyCar win on Sunday at Alabama, former supercar guy. And we love the migration.
We to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
after
the Penske
all that happened
penalties
with Team Penske.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh boy.
No kidding. That's another story for another time. Well, it is kind of right now. Just look at Twitter and you'll see plenty about that. But no, going to be a really exciting weekend. We love the supercars migration. We love the migration of athletes in motorsports coming over to NASCAR. I'm excited to see with, I don't know, and you may know this, just on this topic, does SVG have any slated starts in the Truck Series coming up this year?
Not at the moment, no. All of his races are Xfinity and Cup for right now. Plus, he had that ARCA start earlier this year, so not at the moment, no.
I would expect at some point, though, there's got to be something that opens up for him to hop in, like in that 7 truck, maybe.
I'd love to see it. I mean, I think being a Chevy guy with the alliance that Spire has with Trackhouse, I think it'd be a lot of fun. I mean, Colleague would probably have to sign off on it too, but I mean, I'd be happy with it. I'd enjoy it.
Yeah, no question about it. I think everybody would love to see that, and it would be good for the Craftsman Truck Series because we really don't, we don't know the name Cam Waters. That's not a huge name yet, but you put someone like SVG in a good truck, and people are gonna be like, oh, yeah, we got to tune in for that to kind of see what he's what he's got outside of what he's already doing in the Xfinity Series and a couple Cup starts as well.
You know where I'd love to see SVG race in the Truck Series, and he's gonna do Xfinity here too. But I'd love to see him race at Pocono in July. And the reason why is because Pocono, it's a track that kind of drives like a road course with all the shifting and stuff that goes on there. I think he could be sneakily very good at Pocono. So I'd love to see him there personally.
Yeah, didn't he? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
That'd be if he's got a good truck under him too. I mean, yeah, I don't think anybody would complain about that. Didn't he race at IRP last year?
He did, yeah. I kind of had my hopes dashed. I was hoping personally, that he'd be the guy that Hendrick would tap to sub for Kyle Larson if he couldn't make it at the All-Star race. But they decided not to go with that, which was kind of sad. But still, like, I think, you have to look at tracks that race like road courses, and that's the one to go for, Pocono. And I think IRP kind of is similar to that too, because it's a flat racetrack. It's how long is it? It's what, like 7/8? It's like what, like 6?
A little more than a half mile, I think.
Yeah, a little more than a half mile. It's like kind of it's weird. I know that. But yeah, like those races that you kind of like have to like shift or have to do things like that. Those are the things I think you look for. And I think that's a track that suits SVG well.
No question. But regardless, good to see some of those guys come over into the Craftsman Truck Series, as we will see on Friday night. Keep an eye out. Everything over on the Daily Downforce to catch that entry list when it does come out, to verify a lot of what Josh has talked about. And you never know, you might get some other surprises. The Truck Series entries kind of are changing every single week. So keep an eye out for that, along with everything else you can catch over on the Daily Downforce. But let's get into race picks. We don't have Kyle Busch this weekend. At least we don't think we will. He is the winner of the last race that we had at Texas, which I think everybody thought that was a really good race, 1.5 miles. Now we come to the better 1.5 miles, and we've got a couple samples now with Texas and Vegas, both won by Spire trucks. I think that's a very important note when we get into our predictions here, or at least consider who we're going to like, dislike, etc. But I'll leave it to you. Same deal every single week when we record here. One winner, one loser, and one underdog. Joshua, take it away.
I hate to do the same guy 2 weeks in a row, but I got to look at the guy that led the most laps at this track last fall. It was in the fall, last fall. And also a guy that's run really well on 1.5 miles this year with a top 5 finish the last time out at Texas. I'm going to go with Nick Sanchez this weekend to get it done at Kansas. I just think he's knocking on that door of that win on an intermediate. I think he's really good at intermediates, and I think it's going to be. I think that Spire's is the equipment to beat on intermediates. They've won both of them this year, so I'm going to go with Nick Sanchez as my win pick this weekend.
Okay, all right. What you got for your loser, aka your fade play of the weekend?
I think my loser, I think for that one, I'm going to go with Stuart Friesen. I understand Stuart Friesen had a couple of solid runs at Kansas last year with some top 10s, but this year he's not been able to put together the same type of results on 1.5 miles. He qualified really well at Texas, only to falter during the race, and ended up finishing well outside the top 10, finished 13th, which was kind of disappointing for him. And then at Las Vegas just didn't show any speed. He qualified third. He finished 18th. A very disappointing day overall for Friesen, especially after having the start to the day he did, finishing third in stage 1, then kind of fell off towards the end of the race. I don't know. Friesen just has had trouble putting races together, and so I'm going with Stuart Friesen as my fade pick here this week. I think he could be an underdog, but I just don't love the fact that he hasn't put a whole weekend together, particularly on intermediate tracks. So I'm going with Stuart Friesen as my fade pick. As far as my loser, my dark horse, and you kind of alluded to this guy earlier, but I got to go with Taylor Gray as my dark horse, because look at Taylor Gray. He has a pair of top 10s this year.
Can you even put him as a dark horse? Is he a worthy dark horse?
He hasn't won this. He hasn't won yet.
Okay, that's fair.
I would say, yeah, he hasn't.
If he hasn't won
yet.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll say so because he hasn't won yet. But a top 5 at Las Vegas, and then look at last year, finished second at Kansas in the fall, and also had a top 10 at Kansas in the spring. I think Taylor Gray is going to turn some heads this weekend. I think he could be the guy battling for a win with Nick Sanchez or even Corey Heim this weekend. But I'm going to go with that. That's it. My winner's Nick Sanchez. My fade pick is Stuart Friesen. And my dark horse pick is Taylor Gray.
Okay. Well, I'm going to bounce that right back off of you and go with my winner being Taylor Gray, as I mentioned earlier. And as you said, second here. And he added another top 10 last spring and was really good at Las Vegas as well. Texas went a little differently. But I think Taylor Gray, he's one of these guys that is knocking on the door. And when you look at the 1.5 mile speed, even at Texas, where he had a couple glimpses of being up front, didn't capitalize in big moments, kind of fell off on the long run a little bit, still finished P7. So I love where Taylor Gray's at on getting good finishes. And it seems like his best abilities are shown in the 1.5 miles. And you got to reference that P2 he had last fall here. So I love Taylor Gray. I'm going to be betting on Taylor Gray. I'm sure I'll be able to get a 30-1, 25-1 ticket. I love him. Not as a dark horse or as I would say an underdog, but as my number one pick to win this weekend. My fade play or my loser, I got to stop. I'm so hard on this guy, but I'm going to go Tyler Ankrum. I think we had talked about after Texas, it would have been really good for that team to get some momentum leaving Texas. And then they had the absolute worst case scenario weekend they could have had. And when you look at McAnally, honestly, with Christian Eckes, it really doesn't matter anymore. I mean, he's good everywhere. I feel like before this year, McAnally wasn't as good on the intermediates. Yeah, Christian Eckes won here last fall, stole a win in a late race moment, really, really good at restarts. And 2024 has been a little bit different. Like Daniel Dye had a great run at Texas. The program seems to have been better. So I think I got to ride with the narrative of Tyler Ankrum's season collapsing due to mistakes, due to just the lights are too bright, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I'm going to fade Tyler Ankrum, even though, just on the contrary, if you disagree with me, you can go back and look at Vegas where he had a great run. A few other guys had sped on pit road. Raja Caruth ran away with the win. But the guy that was chasing him down late in that race was the driver of the number 18. That was Tyler Ankrum. But I'm a momentum guy. I think momentum matters throughout these pivotal points of the season. We're at that point after a big break where we've got a few races lined up and the playoff crunch starts now. I think Tyler Ankrum is going to have some more struggles. So I'm going to go with Tyler Ankrum as my loser. And then my underdog, Stuart Friesen. I know you said he is your fade. And I understand, and your reasoning is correct. We've talked about it already on this episode when we talk about our picks for the playoffs. They've had trouble finishing races when they've had speed. You go back to Vegas, he actually had a good truck, was running up towards the front, running top 5, and I think he had a flat tire, had an unscheduled pit stop, ruined his race. Texas, seems like they had speed, just could not capitalize. They've had speed at a few different racetracks this year, but we've seen Stuart Friesen right in the middle of trouble, whether it's in the car or in the truck or out of the truck. And that's what has epitomized the year for the number 52 team. I expect that to turn around a little bit, and I have to because I've picked him to get into the playoffs while he's on the outside looking in at this point. So Stuart Friesen is my underdog because the 1.5 miles typically have been good to him. And when you look back at 2023, 2 top 10s, 1 top 5 at Kansas in both starts. So I got to go with Stuart Friesen as my underdog, and that's what I got.
All right. Well, I definitely think that is bold of you. That is very bold of
Friesen? You think Friesen the underdog?
No, not Friesen as an underdog. I think it's bold of you to pick your fade pick being Ankrum. I think especially with how he ran at Las Vegas. Oh boy, that is a bold prediction for you.
You watch, he'll win now. He'll freaking win now that I did this.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, well, we shall see. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm still. I mean, I can see your logic with the Friesen being a dark horse to some extent, but I'm just like, I kind of feel the same way with Friesen you feel about like with Ty Majeski. It's like this guy doesn't finish races, and that's just something that just kind of sticks with me.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too is like adding to that point, you got to be careful taking too much stock in what happened last year because it is a new year. There's different levels of momentum with drivers. There's drivers with different teams. You have different drivers coming in and out of the series. So, I mean, yeah, you could be blinded looking at data from the last 2 Kansas races, not considering how this year has gone. So, I mean, look, I feel confident about that type of stuff. As a betting man, I have to. And there's a good chance I have money on these guys that I've talked about. But I do also have to acknowledge on the contrary of momentum. Momentum is key. Momentum is important, even if we're talking about different racetracks. Hell, Christopher Bell in the Cup Series, man. Awful. I mean, just on a really, really bad stretch. And you wouldn't think it when you have all these different racetracks we've been to the last 3 weeks. But momentum is key. Momentum matters. And sometimes it matters more than track experience when you're hot or you're not. And someone like Stuart Friesen, he is not hot at all. So I'm capable of seeing both sides. Regardless, I'm sticking with my gut. I'm sticking with what I've seen on the film. Winner, Taylor Gray. Loser, Tyler Ankrum. And underdog, Stuart Friesen. Anything else you'd like to add there?
I think this weekend's race at Kansas, I think race of the year potential. I'm going to say that. I'm going to make that point. Race of the year potential, I think.
I love that. I think everybody's going to have high expectations. Now, it is worth noting last year in this race, we had a lot of cautions. Several drivers were taken out in accidents. Several heavy hitters had a lot of problems in this race. Sometimes that's fun. Sometimes it's not when there's an overload of it. Like we had 7 cautions for 40 laps in a race that was only, how many laps? 200 miles at a 1.5. We had it was a 134 lap race, and we spent a lot of that under caution. I mean, the longest run we had here was the final run, which was a good run when Grant Enfinger pulled away, but it was a 36 lap run. Besides that, we didn't have a run longer than 21 laps in this entire race. So, yes, the wrecks, I think we'll see them because this is a high-speed racetrack. It's multi-groove. And when you have multi-groove high-speed racing, especially with a youthful series like this, I think we're going to see some mistakes. And it's going to make it exciting for sure. I just kind of hope we have a little bit of a better flow than we did in this race last year. Seems like with the way Texas went, we could expect to see some fireworks and expect to see some good racing. So to be determined, but I am excited for it. And I'm sure the fan base is as well when we head to Kansas on Friday night for the Heart of America 200. Thank you guys for listening to the newest edition of the Pickup Throwdown podcast. Be sure to follow Joshua Lipowski, JLipowski18 over on Twitter. Check out everything he's got going on at the Daily Downforce, along with everything that everyone else has going on at the Daily Downforce. DailyDownforce.com, bookmark it. And if you like what you heard on this episode, if you're a big fan of trucks like me, like Joshua, be sure to subscribe, like, share on any of your favorite podcast platforms, and follow me at Dale Tanhardt on all social media platforms as well. If you like anything from informative to iRacing to unprofessional professionalism, we try to do it all, whether it's me, Josh, or the Daily Downforce. And we really do appreciate you listening to this new podcast, the Pickup Throwdown. Going to be a fun weekend, Josh. I guess when we come back, I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but I've got a feeling. You said race of the year. I think we're going to have some storylines. I think we're going to have a big storyline that we're talking about.
Here's the best part. We haven't talked about this yet. First of 5 straight weekends of Truck Series racing. How do you like that?
Ooh, love
5 straight weekends. And you got Kansas, Darlington, North Wilkesboro. You got Gateway in there.
Charlotte.
I think Charlotte's the other one. Oh my, those are all banger racetracks. So this is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun stretch.
Absolutely. Going to be a fun next few weeks on the circuit of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. Guys, thanks again so much for listening. Enjoy the race weekend and enjoy Truck Night in America this Friday night at Kansas. We'll see you for the next one.